On the contrary, in compromising the work they only stole from, they only pretend to teach that our foe is a Ponzi scheme, or money is debt, that money must be spent into circulation. But why? Because you yourselves simply abandon the only arguments which resolve the problem. That you can remember one or two or three words which mean nothing. Fiat, Ponzi scheme, money as debt. People say every day, give us sound bites. That's the very problem. We are the problem when we are not even so interested in the cause of terminal failure that we bore into its teaching immediately, never to be deterred. Ignorance breeds ignorance. We have not just somehow made the internet today a breeding ground for ignorance. We have made the internet a breeding ground to dissemination of every conceivable compromise of the truth, because this is our very common manner. We will never break our enemy's ability to control us if we refuse to ascertain a sufficient representation of the truth ourselves. But we will never break a far worse thing, our own division, if we refuse to hold ourselves accountable to the truth. This is not just a personal obligation to ourselves. It is an obligation to each other, because our failure to unite today is an offense against every person who recognized and supported the only solution yesterday. Daily yet we put off this job at monumental expense to ourselves and each other. Not only would we not lose our homes, our jobs, our businesses, and our very ability to feed ourselves if we adopted mathematically perfected economy tomorrow, but as we've explained, in general, we would be some 12 times as liquid, solvent, or prosperous. Immediately, without even a restoration of extinguished prosperity, much less a final achievement of full prosperity, that is, all the prosperity we are truly capable of and have always been prevented from achieving by the present obfuscation of the currency. What then are we waiting for? The necessarily exacting explanations I have given for the present obfuscation of our currency, for a perpetual escalation of injustice mounting in terminal failure, and for a fact of singular integral solution, are compromised today into literally millions of disparate forms and accounts across today's internet. Not just across the internet, but in plagiaristic work after plagiaristic work, none of which have presented or even concurred in a fact of singular solution. To what possible benefit? Can you understand your predicament or its solution if G. Edward Griffin steals only so much as to inform you you're not borrowing from banking deposits? That banks are not lending money, the money that they have? Some of us think so, but absolutely not. First of all, because his compromisation of my explanation of the obfuscation of our currency isn't even true. Banks can and do loan out depositors money. 700 pages. Hardly a useful and or original word in their entirety. The very program you're listening to has often explained the one veritable and original account of the problem and its solution in no more than a few minutes. Why is that too much for so many of us? Why aren't we shouting across the world already how the Bank of England is on the ropes against a proposition of mathematically perfected economy? If every one of us just spent 10 minutes each day for a week proliferating public knowledge of this freedom of information appeal alone, how long would it be until we succeeded in establishing mathematically perfected economy across the entire world? Today I'd like to speak just a short while about that freedom of information appeal, because we have received not answers, not even one answer, to our vital questions, which expose the banking system's unjustifiable obfuscation of our promissory obligations. We have not received an answer. We have received a reply which asserts our simple questions are unintelligible. Imagine that. Unintelligible. The very thing that we've explained across almost 30 programs and 40 plus years of writing and speaking. All that's unintelligible because an officer of the Bank of England, needing to defend the very falsified premise upon which banking prospers at the terminal expense of all of us, is forced finally by our 4 questions to defend their obfuscation of our currency. We are engaged in the very battle which is the end of banking. And the mainstream media is not going to give ear to this affair. We will only prevail if you proliferate disinformation across the world. Without you, you can't save yourselves. We all know this story of the Titanic. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. On its first voyage abroad, it was destroyed by a collision with a large iceberg because the ignorance by which it sailed condemned it to that course. Arrogance sank the unsinkable Titanic. Divorce from principle sank the Titanic because observation of simple governing principle would have provided for it to steer clear of the fatal objects it could encounter and could identify. Suppose one of us approached the captain of the ship before it collided with an iceberg and explained that we just passed icebergs which proved that we could neither slow or steer away from them if one was square in our course. And our arguments were irrefutable, not only that we had condemned ourselves by sailing at the speed we were to a possible collision if an iceberg indeed lies in our course, but that there wasn't a possible facility on the ship to save the passengers should the ship sink. Suppose all of the details of this event were foreseeable. Well, this shouldn't even be a question to us. Obviously, they were foreseeable. Why? Because the sides of the ship couldn't force an iceberg away of such mass as it did collide with, indeed. And what would happen? But they would crease the side of the ship. And what would happen to a riveted structure of that type, of the kind and quality of steel of that day? You see, all of this was foreseeable. In fact, what was done was a recipe for disaster. And so today, what we call banking is a recipe for disaster. As I've explained many times, it was the cause of the first Great Depression, and it is the inevitable cause of a second Great Depression, and a third Great Depression, and a fourth Great Depression, on and on and on. So long as we, the people, do not meet the challenge, the simple, raw, elementary challenge of learning this obfuscation of the currency accounts for the iceberg we are in the process of colliding with. Unlike the Titanic, we can fix the damage to the ship. We can fix it immediately. I have shown how. We can relieve ourselves of the consequences of the huge gash that's put in the side of our ship. I've already shown how. We simply refinance all debts, counting all prior payments of interest instead toward principal. But we can't even ask for that if we do not understand how. It's the only thing that's right, and the only thing that can save us, and the only thing which is representation. If we are not willing to declare today what is representation, what represents us, that these banking systems cannot possibly represent us to any extent whatsoever, our ship is sunk by our own indifference and ignorance, by our own resistance to acting responsibly and in a timely manner. If these issues don't interest you, get lost. Go listen to some music. We don't need you. You're the problem, and you're the enemy of everyone who wants and recognizes that we need to resolve the problem.